India's voice to the world. I am Anil Thomas. Coming up in the next 60 minutes. Israel approves plan to attack Gaza's Rafah, but keeps truce talks alive by sending team to Qatar. Russian election turnout surpasses 2018 levels of 67.5%. Three challengers in the fray to stop Vladimir Putin from getting another 6-year term. Election Commission of India draws focus to 4 M's to ensure free and fair polls. Date of counting of votes for Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim Assembly elections changed. And Carlos Alcaraz to face Daniel Medvedev in Indian Wells finals rematch. Both finalists come from behind to win. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin is poised to tighten his grip on power on Sunday in a Russian election that is certain to deliver him a landslide victory. Putin, who rose to power in 1999, is set to win a new 6-year term that would enable him to overtake Joseph Stalin and become Russia's longest-serving leader for more than 200 years. More in this report.
The 3-day-long Russia's 8th presidential election that began on Friday and the final day of polling was held on Sunday. The poll result is expected to keep President Vladimir Putin in power for another 6 years. This would enable him to overtake Joseph Stalin to become Russia's longest-serving leader. Besides Russian President Vladimir Putin, the 3 other candidates in the fray were leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, Leonid Salitsky, Vladislav Davanka from Russia's New People Party, and Nikolai Kharitonov, the Russian Communist Party's candidate. The Ukraine conflict has cast a shadow over voting in the election. Over 114 million Russians eligible to vote, including in what Moscow calls its new territories. Residents of the Russian-controlled parts of Ukraine to cast their ballots.
I remember it all well. All of it I remember well. It was all difficult and hard. No water, no light, no gas, no food, nothing. We have been surviving. My flat, it's a totally destroyed house. I have been living there with a housemate for 27 years. What have left of it are just walls. No roof, nothing else.
United States, United Kingdom and the United Nations have condemned Russian efforts to conduct its presidential election in occupied areas of Ukraine.
We continue to condemn the sham election in Ukraine's temporarily occupied territory for what it is, one in a pattern of failed attempts to justify the unjustifiable.
While on the other hand, Moscow accused Ukraine of using air attacks to try to sabotage the election. Besides, more than 50 United Nations member states have condemned Russian efforts to conduct its presidential election in occupied areas of Ukraine on Friday. The counting of votes starts after polling concludes. It continues until the results are finalized. The final results will be confirmed no later than March 28 by Russia's Central Election Commission and will be announced within 3 days of confirmation. Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India.
Well, for more on that Russian elections, joining us is DD India's correspondent Dasha Chernushova joining us from Moscow and Megumi Lim joining us from Kyiv for more on this. Let me first come to you, Dasha. Have these elections in Russia been done, by and large, it's a free and fair elections that one sees on the ground? And when do we see the final results coming?
Well, up to this moment, on the third day of the voting, the turnout has exceeded 70%. That means that it has exceeded the previous presidential election in 2018. And obviously, the authorities have been doing their utmost to make sure that the turnout is high. Political scientists say that is needed to legitimize the ongoing course of the Russian authorities, including the policies on Ukraine. Now, to this moment, polls are still open in downtown Moscow. People are still coming to the polling stations. We also have seen several irregularities taking place throughout the past 3 days, including with people trying to pour dye into the ballot boxes or trying to set fire at the polling stations. But on Sunday, the final day of this voting, at noon, the supporters of the late Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, labeled terrorist and extremist in Russia, all tried to create lines and to overwhelm the polling stations. According to the supporters of Navalny, that was done in order to show to them that there are millions of people who are dissatisfied with this ongoing course. Now, we are expecting the polls to close at 8 p.m. in the evening, and then at 9 Moscow time, which is 6 GMT, we will start getting some preliminary results. Interesting facts, obviously, are surrounding the turnout in the new regions of Russia, as they are often referred to. In the Lugansk People's Republic, the turnout has exceeded 87%, according to the current, to the latest data. And in the Kherson region, the counting has already begun, with the turnout set to be over 80%.
Well, Megumi, the final day of voting began with accusations of Kyiv sabotage. How did polling take place on the ground?
That's right. There's been paramilitary groups that are anti-Kremlin and Ukraine-based that have been carrying out incursions. They are reportedly cross-border incursions into Russia, especially the border regions of Belgorod and Kursk, and they're reportedly made up of Russian citizens who are fighting alongside Ukrainian soldiers against the Russian forces in Ukraine. And we have seen them carry out cross-border incursions to try to disrupt the elections. They have begun these incursions ahead of these elections, have continued to carry out these operations as the elections have gone underway in Russia, and we are seeing updates on their Telegram channels continuing to urge Russian citizens to not vote. They're also urging residents, especially in the border regions of Belgorod, to evacuate as they continue to try to strike military targets in the area. So this is an effort by Russian citizens who are part of paramilitary groups fighting alongside Ukrainian soldiers who believe that Putin should be toppled in the order for the war to come to an end in Ukraine. Now, we have seen Ukraine's chief of military intelligence comment on these recent attacks that have been carried out by these groups. He said that these groups are no longer should be called groups, but they're becoming a force, and he said that Ukraine will help them carry out their operations.
Okay, Dasha, this Russian election, has been criticized both by EU as well as NATO. Will such criticism be put to rest now that, polling is almost over?
Well, indeed, we have heard a lot of criticism coming from the international community against the way the polling is conducted, including in the so-called new territories of Russia, with some actually calling not to recognize them as legitimate. In Moscow, obviously, all those comments are dismissed. Moscow does say that all the international norms are being implemented, and so the international observers whom we've been talking to throughout the day all say they haven't seen any major irregularities as they have visited the polling stations in downtown Moscow. And the Russian officials have also been saying that there have been attempts by the Western countries to interfere with the Russian election. We're expecting the briefing of the Russian Foreign Ministry representative to talk through those interference attempts. But also we've heard that the attempts by some residents to spill the dye into the ballot boxes, according to the Russian officials, have been perpetrated from outside Russia. So certainly the Russian authorities are trying to make it clear to the residents here at home that the attempts of the Western countries to interfere and to meddle with the Russian elections have all been rebuffed.
Megumi, when one takes a look at Russia in particular, this is not the first time that a presidential election is being held during a conflict. Way back in 2000 in Chechnya when the fight took place, and this time around in Ukraine. Do you see any change, especially in the way people have approached this particular elections?
There's no particular change that we're seeing, that I'm seeing here. But of course, there is a certain level of significance and impact that will be coming out of this current presidential elections being carried out in Russia, just because there is a full-scale invasion going on, and we're seeing on the battlefield Ukrainian forces continuing to face critical shortages of ammunition and weapons, and Russian forces it appears gaining the upper hand on the front lines as they try to continue to advance and gain more territories. And that situation, combined with the incumbent Russian President Vladimir Putin's likely win and adding 6 more years to his presidency, will indeed embolden him to continue what he calls a special military operation in Ukraine. And we're also possibly, Ukraine is expecting Russia to mobilize more soldiers, perhaps after the elections are over, to rotate out troops that are currently on the front. And Ukraine is also expecting a renewed Russian offensive in the coming months. So indeed, these elections, of course, have a level of significance for Ukrainian people here.
Dasha, quick word from you. Can Russia's Gen Z make a difference in this particular elections? And what's the update, especially on the noon protest that was seen on the final day?
Well, certainly there is no expectation that any difference will take place, because the understanding here in Russia as well as outside the Russian Federation is that the results of the election is almost a foregone conclusion. President Putin is widely expected to have yet another term in office, and obviously Russians feel that. Actually, one of the things that President Putin has been campaigning on is continuity and stability for the strong and powerful Russia. He outlined the program for the next 6 years, which are now in need to be implemented. So that's why the mood among the Russian people, among the voters here, is that not much will change in the country, but they are seeing the changes that are taking place in the country ever since 2022, when the country launched its operation in Ukraine, and when the country has seen enormous pressure in terms of economic sanctions as well as the worsened ties with the West, but also saw a lot of opportunities that are emerging in this context. So certainly the mood among the Russian people is that continuity is what they have at the moment, but yet there are questions as to what happens by 2030, whether Putin will be running for yet another term to remain as president until 2036, or a new personality could arise.
Megumi, I'll let you have the final word. There were unconfirmed reports about, people in Ukraine, especially in Russian occupied territories, voting on gunpoint. Is there any, truth to these acquisitions or these reports, unconfirmed reports that, global media has been reading?
Yeah, I mean, these are not just accusations. These are statements that have been made by Russian officials as well. We have also seen some verified videos posted on social media, and also accounts of local residents saying that they are poll workers are being accompanied by Russian soldiers as they go door to door to carry out the voting and the election process. Now, Ukrainian officials, of course, are accusing the occupation authorities of widespread intimidation and coercion, but the occupation authority side have actually made a statement confirming that this is indeed taking place, saying that it is to protect the poll workers that are going door to door. So indeed, this is taking place, and as Dasha mentioned earlier, the turnout has been high, but of course the level of transparency is not something that is compared to a fair and democratic country where an election can take place in such a condition and environment. And I believe I may have misheard your question earlier about the voting that is taking place in these 4 annexed regions, that this is something that Ukraine perceives as Putin trying to legitimize his control over these 4 regions that right now he only partially controls, and he's hoping that his Russian forces can fully occupy these 4 regions.
Well, record turnout when it comes to voting. Over 70% of voting is what we've seen. We'll have to wait and watch how the results come out. I'll thank both Dasha as well as Megumi for joining us from Russia and Kyiv this evening. Moving on, meanwhile, long-range Ukrainian attack drones launched by the SBU Domestic Security Service have hit 12 Russian oil refineries during the conflict so far. Officials in the southern Russian region of Krasnodar said that Ukrainian drones had attacked the Slavinsk oil refinery, that's 70 kilometers north of the regional capital, overnight. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces said that Russian air attacks damaged agricultural enterprises and destroyed several industrial buildings in the Black Sea port of Odessa overnight. Russia launched 16 drones and 7 missiles, and Ukrainian Air Force posted this on a social media group. Meanwhile, 14 drones were destroyed on the Odessa region. It is not immediately clear what happened to the 2 drones that were not destroyed or whether the missiles hit their targets. The Air Force said that the missiles targeted Ukraine's Kharkiv, Donetsk and Chernihiv region. A Ukraine-based Russian armed group said it controlled the Russian border village of Krovisk in Belgrade region. Video released by the group on social media purportedly shows its fighters removing a Russian flag from a school building. Head of Ukraine's military intelligence directorate said that the group was fighting quite well and that Ukraine would try to help them to the best of their ability. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Date of counting of votes for Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim assembly elections changed to June 2nd. Jaishankar defends CAA, questions critics on their understanding of history. India-Maldives review ongoing deputation of Indian technical personnel.
In a world that never stops, where information shapes our reality, one app stands out, helps you stay ahead of time. Introducing the DD India app, your gateway to a world of news right at your fingertips. Your most trusted source of news goes global, goes digital. Explore a world of options, top stories, live updates, in-depth analysis and more. Stay informed wherever you are. Real-time alerts keep you ahead of the curve always. The DD India app, connecting you to the world one story at a time. Download now and explore the world of knowledge, insights and authentic information.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Arnold Thomas. The Election Commission of India on Sunday changed the date of counting of votes for the assembly elections in Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim from the 4th of June to the 2nd of June. The decision was made as the term of the 2 assemblies will conclude on the 2nd of June. Elections will have to be wrapped up on or before that date. The 2 Northeast Indian states will go to polls on the 19th of April in a single phase. Well, dates for the general elections have been announced in India in 7 phases, starting from the 19th of April and concluding on the 1st of June. The Election Commission is prepared to crack down on muscle power, money, misinformation and Model Code of Conduct violations. 4Ms. The 4M formula is the way in which the Election Commission plans to hold free and fair elections in this great Indian elections in 2024. Muscle power, money, misinformation and MCC violations will not be allowed and stopped at all cost in this great Indian election. The Election Commission, during the announcement of poll dates for the general elections, warned against the use of muscle power in the upcoming general elections.
Mainly 4 challenges हमारे पास हैं 4 M's: muscle, money, misinformation and MCC violations. तो Election Commission का अधिकांश समय इन्हीं 4 चीजों में लगने वाला है कि how to control muscle power, how to control money power, how to control the menace of misinformation and how to control the violations which are done.
Stressing on the MCC's importance, the Chief Election Commissioner stressed that campaigns should be based on issues and devoid of hate speech and appeals that lean on caste and religion.
My appeal to the political parties again. We are very committed for ethical political discourse. I would like parties to again appeal that please maintain decorum in campaigning and refrain from abuses and personal attacks. That in this digital world, so please avoid creating digital memory of bad words which are coming from your mouth.
Money power has been another daunting task before the Election Commission. The last 11 assembly elections have seen 3,400 crores in cash seized, which is an 835% increase from 2017-18.
National NPCIL will look at if there is a spurt in demand for the payments from the wallets. Cash or money, जो भी धन बल का दुरुपयोग करना चाहेंगे. Political finance in any case is a thing which is in news these days. So this is our effort to add to that thing so that there are much more cleaner elections.
The CEC has adopted the fourfold approach to ensure free and fair elections. The Election Commission of India is committed and has put in place measures to deal with these disruptive challenges to make the great Indian election process one that is like a pole star for other nations to follow and emulate. Anil Thomas for DD India, New Delhi. Well, with the announcement of the general election schedule by the Election Commission of India, the Model Code of Conduct has come into effect. The code plays a crucial role in ensuring free and fair polls. Our next report has more details.
In order to ensure free and fair elections, it is imperative that a set of guidelines to regulate the candidates and political parties is put in place. In India, these norms are called the Model Code of Conduct or the MCC. These guidelines are issued and enforced by the Election Commission of India. To put it simply, MCC is a list of do's and don'ts for the candidates, which they are expected to follow during the election process. It comes into effect from the day the Election Commission of India announces the poll schedule and is operational till the elections are concluded. During the general elections, the code is applicable throughout India. Let's now take a quick look at the key MCC guidelines. The ruling party should not use its official position for campaigning purposes. Parties and candidates should abstain from activities and delivering speeches that may create communal hatred. They should refrain from corrupt practices like bribing, intimidating and transporting voters. The Election Commission of India sends a show-cause notice to candidates if they violate the code. The poll body goes ahead with the necessary proceedings if the candidate fails to reply within the specified time frame. Citizens can also report violations of the Model Code of Conduct by the candidates. To make this process easier, the ECI launched the C-Vigil app in 2018. A person can simply click a picture or take a video and briefly describe the complaint before uploading it on the app. The complainant also has the option to remain anonymous. The C-Vigil app is also a reflection of how the MCC has evolved over the times. The MCC guidelines trace their origins to 7 decades back when in 1960 the political parties in Kerala adopted a code during the state polls. With the enforcement of the Model Code of Conduct, the Election Commission of India has been ensuring a level playing field for smaller parties and independent candidates by helping to keep money and muscle power in check. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, Indian political parties are leaving no stone unturned to woo voters ahead of the 2024 general elections. Ruling BJP and TDP, as part of the NDA, held its poll rally in Palanadu in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh on Sunday. India's Prime Minister visited the state. Andhra Pradesh will go to polls for the general as well as the assembly elections this year. Addressing a public rally, Prime Minister Modi said that the strength of NDA is continuously increasing. Prime Minister took a strong dig at the contradictions in the INDI alliance during his address.
ये गलती कभी मत करना कि आंध्र में जगन की पार्टी और कांग्रेस पार्टी अलग है। ये दोनों एक ही है। एक परिवार के लोग ही दोनों पार्टी चला रहे हैं और ये उनकी मिली भगत है कि जो सरकार के प्रति गुस्सा है वो थोड़ा गुस्सा कांग्रेस की तरफ चला जाए ताकि एनडीए के लोगों को लाभ न मिले।
Well, whereas the opposition-led Congress INDI alliance held their Jan Nyay Padyatra rally in Mumbai as a finale to the Bharat Jodo Nyay Yatra. Speaking at the rally, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi spoke of India's civilizational ethos of love and respect as being the DNA of the country.
एक कि हिंदुस्तान नफरत का देश नहीं है, मोहब्बत का देश है और इस देश में इसके डीएनए में रिस्पेक्ट, मोहब्बत ये बहुत गहरा है। ये पहला देश है जिसने इंडिपेंडेंस की लड़ाई मोहब्बत से लड़ी और कोई देश है ही नहीं।
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar dismissed the criticism from the United States regarding the Citizenship Amendment Act, asserting that the remarks were made without a proper understanding of the law's historical background. Speaking at a conclave in New Delhi, Dr. S. Jaishankar further stressed that the CAA was introduced to tackle the challenges arising from the partition and remarked that the global response seems to ignore the historical context of partition.
If you hear the comments from many parts of the world, it is as though the partition of India never happened. And that there were no consequential problems which the CAA is supposed to address. So, if you take a problem, remove all the historical context from it, sanitize it and make it into a political correctness argument and say, oh, I have principles and don't you have principles? I have principles too. And one of my principles is obligation to people who were let down at the time of partition.
Well, the third meeting of the India-Maldives high-level core group was held in Mal on Sunday. During the meeting, both sides reviewed the ongoing deputation of Indian technical personnel to enable continued operation of Indian aviation platforms that provide humanitarian and medical evacuation services to the people of Maldives. Both sides continue the discussions on wide-ranging issues related to bilateral cooperation. It was agreed to hold the next meeting of the high-level core group in New Delhi on a mutually convenient date. In more international updates, as the armed conflict enters day 163, there is light at the end of the tunnel as Israel agrees to return to the table for talks in Qatar. As top Mossad official leaves to meet negotiators, Netanyahu promises to continue his conflict with Hamas. Meanwhile, aid continues to arrive safely in the northern Gaza Strip. The big question, how long can Israel continue this fight while a pause on humanitarian crisis is the need of the hour? Mihir Makuri gets us the detail as the world looks for a breakthrough.
Now, in its fourth month, the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict stands out as the lengthiest and most brutal clash between these long-standing adversaries. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu criticized its allies for pressuring to halt its operations against Hamas in Gaza and pledged to persist in the fight against the terror group.
To our friends in the international community, I say, is your memory so short? So quickly you forgot about October 7, the worst massacre committed against Jews since the Holocaust. If we stop the war now before achieving all of its goals, the meaning is that Israel had lost the war, and we will not allow this. Therefore, we must not surrender to these pressures, and we will not surrender to them. On the contrary, this simple truth only strengthens our determination to push away the pressure and continue to fight till the end, till a complete victory.
However, optimism for halting the conflict is rising as an Israeli delegation headed by the chief of Israel's Mossad intelligence agency is set to engage in discussions with mediators in Qatar's Doha. This comes after Hamas presented a new proposal for a ceasefire with an exchange of hostages and prisoners. Amidst hopes for peace, Sunday saw 2 Israeli airplanes dropping humanitarian aid packages into northern Gaza, with the aim of easing the escalating humanitarian crisis in the enclave. As reported by the official Jordanian news agency, the Jordanian military carried out 6 food airdrops into Gaza, involving participation from Jordan, Egypt, the US and Germany. And on Sunday, Pope Francis extended his prayers for peace to the conflict zones around the world.
Let us continue to pray for the war-torn peoples of Ukraine, Palestine, Israel and South Sudan.
The latest chapter to a decades-old conflict began after Hamas launched an unprecedented assault on Israel on the 7th of October last year, with hundreds of gunmen infiltrating communities near the Gaza Strip. Israeli military says over 200 soldiers and civilians, including women and children, have been taken as hostages to Gaza. Mihir Makuri's report for DD India.
Well, still to come on DD India News Hour. An eminent guest joins us to deliberate on the 3-day Russian polls and its ramifications. Weather concerns mount from Americas to Europe.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Anil Thomas. A quick recap of the headlines. Russia's presidential election sees over 70% turnout as voting concludes. Israel keeps true stocks alive by sending team to Qatar. And the Election Commission of India draws focus on 4 M's to ensure free and fair polls. Date of counting of votes for Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim assembly elections changed to the 2nd of June. Well, moving forward with international stories, a Libyan Coast Guard vessel interfered rescue operations by crew members of the Doctors Without Borders NGO rescue vessel on Saturday in the southern Mediterranean Sea. A video shot by the crew members of the reconnaissance aircraft Seabird 2, operated by the German NGO Sea-Watch, showed a boat maneuvering near two rescue boats and a wooden boat of migrants. According to Doctors Without Borders SAR team leader, the Libyan Coast Guard had threatened to stop the operation and even tried to board one of their boats. Farmers in Spain, meanwhile, drove through the Spanish capital Madrid with a convoy of tractors on Sunday. Demonstrators were protesting against an array of issues, including cheap supermarket prices, low-cost imports that undercut local producers, and strenuous EU environmental rules. Farmers' demands also include ending free trade agreements, which they say have led to cheaper imports from countries where producers face less stringent environmental standards than those of the EU. US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump told a rally in Ohio on Saturday that November presidential elections will be the most important date in US history. Trump also claimed that US democracy will die if he was not elected to power this November. Let's find out more in this next report.
Republican frontrunner candidate Donald Trump warned of a bloodbath if he is not elected to power, though it was not clear what he was referring to as US candidate was complaining about auto industry. Addressing a public rally in Ohio's Dayton on Saturday, Trump said that the democracy will end in America if he doesn't win the November's presidential election.
If this election isn't won, I'm not sure that you'll ever have another election in this country. Does that make sense? I don't think you're going to have another election in this country. If we don't win this election, I don't think you're going to have another election, or certainly not an election that's meaningful.
Condemning Trump's statement, Biden's campaign spokesperson James Singer emphasized that the US people would not make him win the presidential elections. Singer further said that Trump wants another January 6, but the American people are going to give him another electoral defeat this November because they continue to reject his extremism, his affection for violence, and his thirst for revenge. Meanwhile, former US Vice President Mike Pence said on Friday that he would not back his former boss Donald Trump in the upcoming presidential elections. Pence publicly broke with former president over his role in January 6 riot at the US Capitol.
And it should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year. Look, I'm incredibly proud of the record of our administration.
5 states will hold their presidential nominating contests on Tuesday, a week after both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump garnered enough delegates to clinch their party's nomination. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, to take the deliberations forward, especially on the Russian polls, joining us this evening is former senior diplomat Ashok Sajanhar on NewsR. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Welcome. So let's first try and understand very straight and simple. Why is Vladimir Putin so desperate for a big win in this particular election? Does he need an electoral mandate to continue waging a very unpopular war?
I think, thank you very much, Anil. I think as far as the war is concerned, there does not seem to be any possibility or any likelihood that is going to come to an end in the very, near or foreseeable future. So I think as far as that is concerned, Mr. Putin is going to continue whatever might be the result. I think what he is looking for, number one, in terms of getting a large number of people to come out to the polling booths and to vote, and number two, to get a very significant win from the election, is to send out a very strong message, to send out a very clear message, both domestically as well as internationally, that he is very popular, he is in control, he is in command, he has the support of the people of the country as far as continuation of the war is concerned. So I think this is what he is, the message that he is trying to send out, both globally as well as domestically. And I think here he has also the 4 regions of Ukraine that he has annexed, that Russia has annexed in September of 2022. That is Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kharkiv. And he would also like to show that there is a strong support for Putin. That means those people in those regions are also supportive of the have been annexed by Russia.
Sir, when one takes a look at that overall turnout, that's now over 70% with just the final minutes for, the ballot boxes to be closed. Is this an important indicator to show, at least for Putin, to showcase that the world is behind him?
I don't think, that it can be taken really read at face value, that it is the number, what in 2018 was 67%. Today it is, 70 odd percent, etc., the current indications. Because, there have been so many reports, of course, they are unconfirmed still, that there has been a huge vote rigging, there has been forcible voting as far as the election is concerned. Maybe in the earlier elections, but the earlier elections were really not looked at with such keen interest. This election is being watched with very keen interest globally, internationally, because a war is going on at this moment. So there has been, what Putin and the establishment there in Russia has also put a lot of pressure. And we have seen that, even those candidates who might have been marginally opposed to the conflict, to the so-called special military operation, they have not been allowed to contest the election. And the 3 candidates who are standing against Putin, not one of them has been critical of what Putin is doing. Only one of them is very, in a very muffled tones, he has been against the war with Ukraine. But otherwise, the position of all the candidates has been very, very similar to what Putin has been advocating. So, there is no opposition has been allowed to come forward and to challenge President Putin. So I don't think that the numbers can really be taken at face value. And, Mr. Putin, of course, he will go to the world, and the people, the establishment in Russia will go to the world saying that, he's won a bigger, there has been a bigger participation and maybe even bigger mandate that he's got. But I think it will really have to be, we'll really have to watch it and analyze it very closely.
Ambassador, in that context, what is likely to change post these elections for Putin and Russia?
I think the confidence that Mr. Putin has, that will grow. He'll become even more stronger in terms of, going further into Ukraine. At the moment, he has about 20%. He occupies about 20% of the territory of Ukraine. The southern part of Ukraine, that is close to the Black Sea, that is still not under Russian occupation. Odessa is not being taken. So I think he will go in a much stronger way to occupy and to apply even greater pressure as far as Ukraine is concerned. And he knows that when he is applying greater pressure on Ukraine, it is really greater pressure on the European governments as also on the US government. And in that context, I think the better that he does on ground in Ukraine, the worse that Ukraine does on ground in Ukraine, the worse it is going to be for Mr. Biden's chances, because it would be seen as his big failure, and it would be seen as a failure for the other European countries, those who have been coming forward, whether it is UK, whether it is Germany, or the others who have been coming so staunchly and strongly in support of Ukraine.
Well, when one takes a look at especially the Gen Z that Russia has, it's got a population of close to 146 million people, but the Gen Z, has almost seen, or the people who cast their vote for the first time have almost seen, a Vladimir Putin rule. Does that make, or does that, help Putin, as Gen Z in large numbers would back Putin and his ideas?
It's a big question, Mark. Anil, it's a very valid question. It's a very relevant question that you pose. But I think the opacity that we see as far as Russia is concerned, so it is not very clear as to which way, the Gen Z would be moving. Would they be sort of, more in terms of liberal ideas, or it would be, in terms of more nationalistic, more supportive of Putin, buying the narrative that Mr. Putin has been trying to advance, that it was basically the expansion of NATO that forced Russia to go into Ukraine, and if Russia had not done that, then it was imminent. It was an attack from Ukraine and by NATO was imminent and inevitable. I think increasing number of people in Russia have been buying this narrative. So it is possible that even as far as the Gen Z would also have bought this narrative. I've seen that a large number of people, the young people, technocrats, they have fled Russia. They have gone to very many Central Asian countries. They've gone to the Caucasus because they didn't want to be drafted when the drafting in September 22 started. So many of them have gone out. They have not been supportive of the Putin's initiative in launching the conflict. But I don't know whether they will also be allowed to vote freely in in the election, because we have seen that even as far as Navalny's funeral was concerned, although there was sort of so much of pressure that people should not be coming out, but there were thousands of people who came out to participate in Navalny's funeral. But we'll really have to wait and see. This Gen Z is a very important element, but which way it is moving, I think it is still quite unclear.
We'll leave it there. Thank you and appreciate you joining us this evening, Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar. Well, from volcanic eruptions lighting up the night sky to extreme droughts and devastating floods, nature is flexing its might around the globe. Here are some updates from weather anomalies from Iceland, Brazil, and Argentina.
Lava flowed from a volcano in southwest Iceland that lit up the night sky on Saturday, slowed on Sunday. The eruption, the fourth since December, sent fountains of molten rock soaring from a roughly 3-kilometer long fissure.
The eruption was quite well energetic, we could say. There was a lot of material coming out, more than in the previous eruption. So lava was flowing quite fast, and it was the eruption came out in a similar place as the ones that have come out before in the recent times. So this is the fourth eruption in this area since December.
Extreme drought in western Brazil has pushed family farmers to shift to different areas as prolonged dry spell wreaks havoc. In the Midwest town of Mukajai, the drought has left 18,000 people without water. This has led to disruption of natural habitat of the region, causing an environmental emergency with food and water shortage. A large area of eastern Argentina soared underwater after heavy rains caused flooding. The weather authorities of Argentina have issued a yellow alert with possibility of heavy rains battering the region. Streets of eastern Argentina got completely submerged, with locals wading through thigh-high water and cars stranded. Rishabh Sharma's report for DD India.
Well, let's take a quick look at other stories making news. Indian bureaucrat Ratikant Basu, who was a pioneering figure at the dawn of satellite broadcasting in India, has passed away at the age of 82. Basu served 32 years in the Indian Administrative Service and 16 years in the electronic media, including public broadcaster Doordarshan. He was the former CEO of Star India. An Indian Air Force C-17 aircraft executed a precision airborne drop of 2 combat rubberized raiding craft boats along with Indian Navy's Marcos in the Arabian Sea as part of the ongoing anti-piracy Operation Sankalp. The operation was carried out to rescue the crew of bulk carrier vessel MV Rood. India's National Testing Agency will conduct the CUET undergraduate test between the 15th and 31st of May. 2 dates in this period overlap with the general election dates, that's May 20th and 25th. The last date for filing out applications is March 26th. The exam date sheet will be announced based on the registration data. Niger's ruling junta has revoked its military cooperation agreement with the United States with immediate effect. The agreement allowed American military personnel and civilian staff on the country's soil. DD India's Isaac Lucando has the details.
The declaration follows a 3-day U.S. delegation visit to renew contact with the junta. According to the junta spokesperson, Colonel Amadou Abdramane, the decision was prompted by the American delegation's attempt to interfere with Niger's right to choose its anti-terrorism partnerships.
The government of Niger, taking into account the aspirations and interests of its people, resolves in all responsibility to denounce with immediate effect the agreement relating to the status of United States military personnel and civilian employees of the U.S. Department of Defense on the territory of the Republic of Niger.
Last year, the ruling junta seized power, expelled French and European forces, and sought support from Russia, echoing actions taken by neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso. Despite using its Niger base to monitor jihadist activity, the U.S. has limited assistance to the military government since the coup. The junta, previously aligned with the U.S., has now shifted its stance, potentially affecting the fight against jihadists. The military junta spokesperson refrained from demanding the U.S. departure, and the U.S. Defense Department has yet to issue a statement. As of last year, Niger hosted approximately 1,100 U.S. troops stationed at 2 bases, with one serving as a drone base for the U.S. military. Isaac Lucando in Dar es Salaam, reporting for DD India.
Well, massive crowds came to Chicago to celebrate the St. Paddy's Day. The Chicago River was dyed emerald on Saturday morning, green, that's green, ahead of the 69th annual St. Patrick's Day parade. People lined the street to get a glimpse of the iconic dyeing of the Chicago River. St. Patrick's Day, which falls on March 17th, is special for the Irish when they celebrate the death of St. Patrick. The Irish holidays bring a weekend of revelry to Chicago too. It is much more fun day in Chicago with the Windy City's river gleaming in a vibrant shade of emerald.
This is the Linders family. We're from Dublin. We came especially to see the river turn green. We don't do that in Ireland. So we had to come. It was on our bucket list.
The festive occasion draws thousands of spectators from across the globe who watch in delight as the Chicago River transforms into a luminous green canvas.
It's amazing. Like, this was a bucket list. We come down to Chicago multiple times a year and have never made it down for St. Paddy's Day. So this is something I've wanted to do since I first saw it probably 20 years ago.
The tradition dates back to 1962 and is now in its 69th year. To mark the occasion, the Chicago Plumbers Union infused the river with 50 pounds of green dye, covering a quarter-mile stretch with a vivid algae-like color. Fuzail Ahmed's report for TD India. Well, renowned rock luminary Steve Harley has passed away at the age of 73. Celebrated as the frontman of the iconic rock ensemble Cockney Rebel, the English singer-songwriter died, succumbing to a brief but courageous confrontation with cancer. His recent tour was temporarily halted last month as he pursued treatment for his illness. Well, the Tokyo Electric Power Company has completed the fourth phase of discharging nuclear contaminated wastewater into the Pacific Ocean on Sunday. The operator of the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant released approximately 7,800 tons of wastewater into the sea over a span of about 17 days. Cocoa prices, meanwhile, are sitting near record highs, which is driving up the cost of chocolates in France. Suppliers have increased prices by 15% this month alone. Some companies are slimming down on size to save cost while keeping prices the same. Others are adding cheaper alternatives like nuts or are simply reworking their recipes to use less chocolate. Russians celebrated the Maslenitsa folk festival by setting fire to a giant wooden structure at an open-air art park in central Russia. The festival marks the start of spring. This year, the construction was dedicated to forces of nature. You're watching DD India News Hour. Time now for sports updates. Starting first up with tennis. Defending champion Carlos Alcaraz of Spain and Russian fourth seed Daniil Medvedev will clash in Sunday's final of the Indian Wells. Medvedev prevailed in 2 hours and 23 minutes to set up a rematch of the 2023 final against Carlos Alcaraz after both prevailed in intense three-set thrillers on Super Saturday. Alcaraz bet Australian Open champion Jannik Sinner of Italy 1-6, 6-3, 6-2 in the semi-final. Alcaraz earned his 11th straight win at Indian Wells and ended Sinner's remarkable 19-match winning streak. Medvedev, on the other hand, needed 3 sets to reach the final. Excited motorsport fans thronged India's Kashmir, hosting its first Formula 4 racing festival on Sunday. Budding racers gathered from India's Delhi, Maharashtra and Karnataka to promote the sport and participate in the event. Car drifters flaunted their speeding techniques and showed unique stunts with the aim of making the sport more known in India. The first Formula 4 racing championship was set to take place at Madurai's International Circuit in southern Tamil Nadu in the year 2023, but was later postponed due to floods in the southern state. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also visit our website ddindia.co.in. We're going to be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Anil Thomas. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts. We demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie